My guest today is Rachel Mathews.
So yeah, I'm basically part of a small group of local people who have got together to go to our local council and tackle them on issues we're concerned about, particularly some of their environmental policies that aren't remotely green, and give them a different perspective to the one that they're getting from the council officers, because a lot of the councillors don't have time to do thorough research themselves, especially on subjects as massive as global warming and climate emergencies and all that kind of stuff. So we go along and we try and give them an alternative dissenting viewpoint, but we always go in with very scientific based so we can back up everything we say in an effort just to give them an alternative point of view. So there's myself, there's Karina and Cheryl. We go the most, but we're also joined by two gentlemen called Lance and Brian, who are from another group called the Peacekeepers, which for those that haven't heard of them, they are a constitutional law group. So they tackle them on issues of codes of conduct and that type of thing, and also hold them to account over the so-called climate emergency.
Are you okay with sharing the full names of those other folks, or is first names better?
Yeah, it's Karina Cooper. What's Cheryl's second name? Cheryl Taylor. So it's Karina Cooper, Cheryl Taylor, Lance Peatling. I don't actually know Brian's second name.
Okay. And as I was saying just before we hit record here, I'm just a huge fan of what you're doing. I first became aware of you on a thread on Twitter, I think in 2023. And you're getting hundreds of thousands and millions of views, right, on your videos of you standing up at council meetings and just dissecting this stuff using facts and data. I totally love it.
Yeah, that was quite surprising. I think when you first reached out to me last year, I was like a deer in headlights. I didn't know what had happened. Millions of people saw that clip, and it started up yet again. I noticed it the other day doing the rounds. That was quite a shock to the system because, Colchester's not exactly, well, they call it a city, but it basically is quite a small town. And for suddenly millions of people to be watching a few of us just standing there talking to our council, none of us were quite prepared for that.
Now, is there something special about Colchester, about its more green or more crazy green, or is it just one of tons of crazy green councils in the UK and elsewhere?
It's one of 300 councils that have taken it upon themselves to declare a climate emergency. And one of the questions we've put to them is, on what evidence do you have that you have based your decision to make this climate emergency? We have also asked for their definition of a climate emergency. And in over 9 months of emails, they haven't been able to define it, because our question to them was, well, if you can't define it, how will you know when it's over? But no, they cannot answer any of the most basic of questions.
So what is going on there? That are they taking orders or directives from up above, and they're kind of singing from they're using the same hymnal or something? What is it, a top-down thing, or did people run for council saying, I want to do this net zero thing and here's why? Was that part of their election pitch?
Well, I think it's a mixture of both. They certainly get additional funding if they do things that are, for example, they can put in cycle lanes and low traffic neighbourhoods and all those sorts of lovely things. If they go along with it, they can then ask for additional money to do things that not necessarily local people want or need. And also there's a lot of idealism and genuinely belief in the council. In Colchester, it's the Liberal Democrat with Labour and Green. It was an official coalition, but now it's just Liberal Democrats, but they all carry on and they all believe passionately in the environment, which is all well and good. It's lovely. I mean, who doesn't want to protect the environment? But our point has been, you're trying to protect it with some of the most polluting things on earth. And, whilst no vehicle or no form of mining is ever going to be good, there's always going to be harms. When it comes to lithium mining, and you've got the sulfuric acid and the radioactive uranium that pollutes the soil and water supply for over 300 years, how is that saving the planet? And again, they haven't been able to answer that. But also, as I said earlier, that the councils are actually steered, or the councillors, by the council officers. So they get a lot of direction from them on what to do and what to say. Everyone wants to be politically correct and being seen to do the right thing without putting in the investigative work to see if it's actually necessary and right. And that's been our job, to try and go in and say, hang on a minute, not only are EVs really not good for the environment, but solar panels are bad. So are wind farms, which was devastating for me because I've always been a really big fan of solar and wind farms. So it was in my 20s on my website. I had a page devoted to green technologies because it sounded so wonderful. But in my 20s, it hadn't occurred to me to do any research. So now I've done it, I was absolutely horrified. And also I've got solar at home. So it just in my office. So when you realise just how bad this is, I mean, I was feeling physically sick for quite a few weeks every time I looked at the battery and solar panel setup I'd got, once you really realise the amount of harm it does. So it's just trying to get that message out there to the councillors so that they won't do any more, because they've got the streets absolutely littered with electric scooters and electric bikes because they want to elicit behavioural change within the public. And get us out of our cars and onto these electric scooter fire trap things. So it's just putting the alternative point of view that actually you need to look at this closer than you have done.
Can you talk about your personal path about you started out as a fan of this green stuff, and then when did you dig into it? And after that, when did you start going public and talking at council meetings about this stuff?
Well, it was in my 20s, as I said, that I was very pro it because, I mean, doesn't it sound a beautiful idea? Harnessing energy from the sun and the wind. I mean, what could be nicer than that? And the concept is very nice, but it hadn't occurred to me at that time in my life to research it. It just immediately in my head, think, oh, wow, that's got to be better than oil and all the other stuff we're doing. The reason we started going to the council initially was we were concerned they were going to make it 15-minute city because a flyer went round that they were going to make it carless in the centre of Colchester. So that immediately, the fact they just turned it from a town into an official city and now they wanted to make it carless, that set the alarm bells ringing. So we went along to the meeting just to listen to see if that was the case, and that they denied it. But during that meeting, they mentioned the number of EVs they were going to bring in and also a rapid transit bus system. And if any of us that have been on the alternative social media channels like Telegram had seen loads of EV fires, and sort of 18 months ago, you hadn't really seen it on the mainstream so much. So it was really from that point of view that we thought, oh, hang on a minute, we need to tell them that these are really quite dangerous. This is not a good idea. And in so doing the research on the fires, we suddenly started to realise, do a bit of research on the batteries themselves, and then it became apparent, oh my goodness, this really isn't green. So I was completely hands up naive on all of this. It hadn't occurred to me. And let's face it, who hasn't got a lithium battery in their phone and in their computer? So we're all guilty of this. But our argument to the council has been, it's the sheer quantity that you're going to need for electric vehicles compared to the damage we're already doing with our mobile phones and computers, which one can argue are essential for our way of life at this moment in time, that, really it's unnecessary because, what's wrong with a standard push bike? Now, in Colchester, it's quite hilly, so that is why they're not, pushing forward a traditional bike. So it was the more research we did, and then when that first video went viral on YouTube, that had about 200,000 views. And we had so many comments saying, well, you do realise solar's bad, don't you? And I was like, no. And I suggested, because I didn't realise on that first video that you get an extra minute to reply. So off the top of my head, I started spouting about, why don't you look at hydrogen? And then I had a ton of comments going, no, hydrogen's not green, or a lot of the hydrogen isn't green. You don't know what you're talking about. And you start to research that, and then it goes on to the wind turbines, and you think, I don't believe it. None of this green stuff is actually green. It's just an absolute money spinner. And I think it's something like $4 billion a day in the green industries. And you can see why it's so popular. And certainly with the movie that you were part of, that you produced, you did such an excellent job of showing, following the money, that people can't speak out about this not being green and true, and everybody's tied in. And now there's so many green jobs that so many people's livelihoods depend upon it. It's just making the situation worse and worse. So trying to get that over to our councillors has been surprisingly difficult. We thought with such obvious information. And, we've told them about, they have an anti-slavery policy on their websites. We've told them about the cobalt mining. Now, I know some vehicles don't require the cobalt, but a lot still do. And certainly all the electric bikes they've got around Colchester probably got them in. So we're just trying to get across to them that this stuff really isn't good. So you'd think highlighting about the pollution, highlighting about the child slave labour would be enough. I only honestly thought I'd have to go in there once. I was so naive and shocked. The fact we've gone in so many times to just get this message across. They are so set in their ways that EVs are good. We've managed to switch the conversation now. They've admitted, okay, EVs aren't that great, but they're better than all the other options. And then you ask them, well, why is it better? And then it comes down to because of the CO2. So then you have to go in again and educate them on the CO2. And I never wanted to speak about climate change because, again, when you contacted me last year, you said, oh, I've got a climate change podcast. Do you want to come on? And I'm like, no, I don't know anything about climate. Really? I'd be a really bad guest. Don't have me on. Thinking it would be this impossibly complex subject to understand. And I don't for a minute claim to know every last molecular activity that causes weather. But because the videos have gone so viral, I've been lucky enough to have a lot of geophysicists and climate scientists get in touch. And the turning point for me was going to see Sandy Adams at Glastonbury. She organised that net zero debate, and the very wonderful Ralph Ellis were there, and so was Peter Taylor. And watching their presentations, particularly Ralph's, because he really spelled it out with the slides that, a school child could understand it. And suddenly it's like, oh, CO2 isn't capable of generating this amount of thermal radiation back to the Earth. So what on earth is going on? And having people like that on hand, Ralph has helped us with all our council speeches to do with climate change, net zero, etc. And having an expert on hand that we can write our speeches and say, can you just go through this and check I haven't said anything stupid, that it's actually accurate? And he goes through and says, yep, could just change this and just modify that a bit because I understand what you're saying, but we've got to get it scientifically perfect. Now I'm a lot more confident with it because even I can see as a layman who knows nothing about, how the climate functions, I can see CO2 can't possibly, or certainly the amount that humans produce can't possibly be causing global warming, as they've said. And it shocked us all just when you start to study it with just the slightest amount of, it doesn't take that much time to research it and go, oh, how on earth have they got away with this? It is so obvious once you start to look into it. So it's been quite a shocking journey from January last year to where we're at now.
So yeah, your whole story makes me so happy when I see that you're bringing the data over and over. You're bringing all this great data, and you're referencing a Will Happer and a Gregory Wrightstone's Inconvenient Facts, and you mentioned Ralph Ellis. You're mentioning the series work of Willie Soon, and what's up with that? It's just brilliant that when you're doing the speaking, you're bringing the data, you're putting up the slides up there showing the graphs of all sorts of things. It's fantastic. What is happening in the room when you're in a city council meeting? Are you getting support from the audience and the people? You're making slight inroads to the council itself. Is that right? Slight inroads?
A little bit. It does seem to be quite political, but half the councillors are scrolling on their mobile phones trying not to listen. The ones that are open-minded are the ones that aren't actually in power, so they've got nothing to lose by listening. And we've had several councillors from various different political parties come up to us afterwards or contact us, on Messenger or something, and they're getting interested. Now, only one or two is willing to speak up in public, but they're getting more confidence because some of them have said, I always thought that wasn't quite right. And I'm very interested listening to you. I've not got an opinion that you're definitely right, but I did have some concerns. So we're reaching the people that were reachable. Whether we'll ever reach the ones that are completely brainwashed in their beliefs, I don't know, but we will have planted some seeds because truth will out. It comes out eventually. It always does. Who knows which decade, but more and more people are aware. Certainly, I've noticed the difference in comments from 18 months ago to now on social media. Essex County Council put on this thing. I think it was an app they were trying to advertise to get people to monitor their carbon output or something ridiculous. And I recognised a few names, and then scrolling down, I was scrolling through the comments. I thought, well, that's more people than I know. It's not our lot leaving these comments. It was general public absolutely berating them like, this is absolute nonsense. So it was joy to read. There must have been 100 comments under this app. And I know a year ago that wouldn't have been there. So the tide is turning. Those that are smarter and politically ambitious are definitely watching the tide turn, and they're being very careful with what they're saying, and they're being more open to having debates, because we are pushing for a public debate with the council there. They're not organising it now. So Lance and Brian from the Peacekeepers, they're taking it upon themselves to get that event organised so we can have Peter Taylor and Ralph Ellis come along and do their talk. And also invite the Green Party to bring whoever they want to be pro. So it's a proper debate, because in Glastonbury, they couldn't get anyone to debate Ralph and Peter. So we want a proper debate. And we've got enough people that are really passionate in Colchester. Whether their political parties will let them will be interesting. So I'll let you know when we've got a date and a venue. And if anybody wants to come along who's in the area, that would be good. We want as many people there as possible, so that people get exposed to this information. That's the key thing. It's educating people.
Yeah, I do think we're clearly seeing this whole climate narrative fall apart in front of our eyes here. Your success just shows that you got 6 million views, right, on just one clip or something. I don't know if that was on Twitter or elsewhere, that you're getting so much exposure globally. It just makes me so happy to see that. And I think if you do this debate, that debate is going to get an enormous amount of viewers to watch it. So when would that happen?
We're hoping either June or July. I would imagine it'll be July, because getting it all organised. So trying to, carry on from where Sandy started, but it's getting people that will actually come and debate. And that's the tricky part, because you don't want it to be one-sided. You want that backwards and forwards. That's so important. So yeah, that's what we're pushing for. Whether how many councillors will come along is another matter, because we were hoping the council were going to put it in the council building, but unfortunately the ceiling's falling in or something of their main conference room, so we can't do it there. But hopefully enough will turn up. But you never know. At least that information gets out to the public. That's the main thing. And then more and more public can put pressure onto their councillors, because they get it in their head that it's just a small group of activists, as they like to call us, and we're not a representation of the masses. But when you see the comments under those videos, and yeah, I don't know how many million that particular clip had, because we didn't produce it. Someone took a clip from the main video, and on 2 people that shared it, I could see there was 6 million, but then it was shared goodness knows how many times from there. So who knows how many times that's been viewed. But that is very powerful, and as I say, very unexpected. But the more of that can happen. And I think it was good, because in the council, you're only allowed to have 3 minutes to have your say. So that forces you to be very concise. And that, I was tearing my hair out to begin with, writing that speech. But afterwards, I've realised, actually, that's done us so much of a favour, because that's what's made it go viral. Because I was determined I was going to cram in every last thing that I could possibly get in there. And that's helped us with those video clips. Whether a whole debate would go viral, I don't know, but certainly we could do the main clips from it. And the more normal people get out there and have their say to the council and to the public as a whole, because a lot of the truthers can be what I call extreme truthers, where they'll just spit out every last bit of information with every last conspiracy theory, and it just loses people immediately. I mean, if I went back in time and told the me of 4 years ago everything I know now in one blurt out, I would think, oh my goodness, what happened to you? You need to be medicated. You don't want to spit out every last detail in one go. You've got to meet people where they're at and give them a bit of information at a time, and hopefully enough to make them curious enough to do their own research. So we have gone in very slow and plodding with how we've done it, to try and get people from where they're at to where we want them to go, and just, i.e., start questioning things a bit better. And the more people that can do that, the better. And, predominantly, as I say, it's really middle-aged women in cardigans. That's quite difficult to say, you're these weird, subversive, whatever, troublemakers. So having fairly reasonable, sensible people go in, there's a lot of power in that. And it's very difficult for them to say things against us. When you're very reasonable, we don't go in and get angry. Well, as you've seen from the videos, we're always very calm and reasonable with how we present the information. Because if you go in a combative way, and if you go in from a place of fear or anger, that immediately shuts down your audience. You're not going to reach them. If you can just go in and present information and ask a few questions, you're more likely to get that breakthrough and connection with people. So, that's what we try and do anyway.
So have you gotten feedback yet of other people at other councils doing similar things? Like Sandy Adams for sure has gone viral, and Corinna Cooper, but any others?
Yes, we've actually got it on our Council Watch YouTube channel. There's a small section on how to do it at your own council. So we've got about 10, I think, now, and there's more in the pipeline of other council watches starting up and down the country, which is fantastic. And their councils, well, I've always thought we've got pretty good councillors at Colchester because they seem good people, hardworking and genuinely trying to do the right thing, albeit misguided from the advice that they're getting from mainstream and the council officers. But when you compare it to some of the other councillors, it's just unbelievable. In Stockport, they were calling the guy that spoke a climate denier, conspiracy theorist in the actual room of the council. I mean, that's one thing to say that about people once they've left, but not to their face. And they were just unbelievably arrogant. So we've got clips from lots of different council watches on the main channel as well. Eastbourne are doing a good job. So Liverpool, North Yorkshire, we've got them popping up everywhere now, which is wonderful.
I enjoyed one thing you were saying about the carbon literacy training. You were pushing back against that whole idea. You wanted them to at least say carbon dioxide. Are they still going ahead with that this propaganda thing? They're pushing this carbon literacy training on people?
I don't know. I'd imagine they still are, but we found out before that meeting that none of the councillors had actually gone through the training, because when you investigate each councillor, it tells you what training they've done on the council website. But we'd heard, like, literally the night or the week before, I think it was, that they were planning on rolling this out. So it was like, oh, cool. Okay, here's an opportunity to really put them off. One, wanting to do that training in the first place. But two, because we've sown that seed of just how manipulative this training is, they will be awake to it when they go through it. So if they go through it, still, hopefully we've done enough with Karina's speech to get it through to them that, yeah, this isn't good stuff and this is highly manipulative. And we had a behavioural psychologist, David Charalambous, although actually I don't think he likes being called that, communications expert. He went through that, and so we had at least somebody professional to say, no, this is as manipulative as you think it is. And it's very underhanded for anyone that hasn't come across carbon literacy training. They basically want you to prey on vulnerable groups to indoctrinate them into climate change and how that you must go on a carbon-friendly diet and all this type of stuff. And perhaps gently say to people, you only need one child, don't have any more, one's enough. All those little things that are really none of big government's business. And then to try and basically recruit people. It was a very cultish way of spreading, very grassroots as well. And the councillors would be responsible for getting people together in these groups. I mean, it snaps of coercion and brainwashing, and the way the training was written. And we've only got access, to the written stuff. Anyone that's been through the training, it's even worse because you have to sit there for 2 whole days. You're not allowed to speak to anyone else. It's all done by Zoom. So you're not even allowed to just say, hey, doesn't that sound a bit weird to you? You've just got to go through the training and then out the other side and suddenly start indoctrinating people. It's really quite scary stuff. So I hope we have done enough with that speech to put them off, or at least alert them to the fact it's highly manipulative and they shouldn't be using it. And yes, carbon, it could mean anything. Could you please get it right? It's carbon dioxide that you want to reduce. But anyway, there we go.
On one of your videos, I saw there was a guy that got up. He started talking about maybe the Magna Carta or something, and they were trying to make him stop speaking, and he kept saying vexatious and everything. Have they tried to shut off your microphone or take away your 3 minutes when you're talking about climate and energy, or have they allowed you to speak every time you want to speak?
No, they've never done that before. We didn't even know they could mute the microphones or switch them off. So that was a whole new thing, and none of us knew that particular gentleman, Gordon, but it was quite an event. But the fact they called the police on him, and just because he was challenging the legality of council tax, because I don't know how it works where you are, but basically here it's a demand for payment, whereas it's said that it's a bill, but a bill you would have to agree to what you're purchasing. Whereas this is a demand with menaces. So if you don't pay it, they'll send the boys round and you'll end up in prison for not paying it. So it's quite a corrupt method of doing it. So nobody is against contribution. It's the extortion. We should be deciding amongst ourselves, here's how much we want to contribute and here's what we want to contribute to, not have money spent on a whole load of stuff that we actually don't want or need, that is very much agenda driven. So that was what he was trying to say, but got shut down before he got a chance. But he did actually come back a few months later and try again. And that was equally as entertaining. So yes, it's recently though, it's a brand new year for them, and they've just voted in the new mayor. And the very first thing they voted on was have your say, and to try and censor and shut down. You're not allowed to say the same subject more than every six. There's got to be a 6-month gap. So we've been going in month after month talking about climate change in one form or another. So that's a no now. They get to decide. You've got to ask your questions ahead of time, which I actually don't have a problem with, because we have sent our questions in ahead of time because we wanted decent answers, but they weren't reading them. So I would actually welcome them doing some homework and being able to give us a proper answer rather than the normal word salad that they come out with. But there's various other things that basically they can decide whether we're allowed to speak now. Which, we knew it was coming. It was inevitable because we've really sort of held their feet to the fire somewhat on a lot of these issues. And it has been very uncomfortable for them, especially when they know they're doing things that are against the public good. So that was another reason we set up the Council Watch YouTube channel, because we knew at some point this was coming. And also YouTube gives you a wider audience reach than we can do at the council. So yeah, so we know it's been coming, but it's not a problem. They can try and shut us down, but they won't be able to. One way or another, we are going to have our voices heard, and they can't get rid of us as much as they'd like. But they've had a good attempt at it.
So do you have any advice for people who are speaking up at their local board meetings, et cetera, that should they have multiple people recording on their phones just in case they can't get the official recording? Or have you seen people where situations where they get shut down, they don't allow recording because they don't want this stuff to go viral?
Yeah, you have to look at your council's constitution, because it will tell you there whether you can film or not. Hopefully you can. And yes, always get other people to record it. A lot of the time I would have my laptop on a screen recorder so that I had good audio, because I'd noticed that the audio quality phases in and out because they streamed it via Zoom. So I would always make sure we got a good recording of us speaking, even if we can't get the councillors' replies too clear. So yeah, it's going in and preparing, really. We've got a Dropbox folder, resource folder that we've created that's got all our speeches in. So there's access to that just if you go to Colchester Council Watch YouTube channel, in the welcome video, there's the link to it. And there's about 20 speeches now. They're not all on climate change because we had a few hassles with their security guards that needed dealing with. But people are welcome to strip out anything in those speeches that will be useful. Everything's been thoroughly researched that's been said in those. So they can take it from there, but basically don't get irate, because the main thing of it isn't to go in and tell them off, which is very tempting with everything that's happening in the world and, everything these councils are doing. but a lot of them are doing it in ignorance, and they're coming from a good place. So it's meeting them where they're at and not dishing out too many conspiracy theories if you can manage it, and just keep it to the facts. And, treat them respectfully, human being to human being, and you have a much better chance of reaching people than when you're going in yelling at them. And practice your speeches out loud, time yourself so that you're within that time allowance, because I think most councils allow time allowance. And then, if you come in from a good place and you're not angry and you're not ruffled by what they say, because you will get a load of nonsense back again, it's very disarming for them when you don't react with anger, because they're used to people coming in and being angry. So not getting angry and you can reasonable them to death. And that's more of a superpower than getting cross. Just do what you can do. And if you're not getting through, or you're not feeling confident to go in and actually speak to the whole council, you can go into meetings that are smaller, or you could contact your local councillor and see if they'll meet up with you for a cup of coffee or something and just chat and have a few emails backwards and forwards. It's as many people as possible reaching out that's going to make the difference, so that they realise it's not just, a little group of nutters that are climate deniers that have got together, that it's ordinary people that have taken the time to research. And then they do start to listen. We've certainly noticed they are listening, and they are changing how they're saying things now. So it can be done.
Have you done any work yet in trying to get climate and energy realists elected to the local council and being part of the council, or making it at least an election issue where people talk about it a lot when they're deciding who to vote for?
Yeah, last year a couple of people ran, but they didn't get the leaflet printed in time, and it's actually really hard work getting the general population as a whole, and getting them out of the apathy, because in Colchester, nearly 70% of people did not bother to vote. And those that do are almost pre-programmed to vote for the same person that they did the time before and the time before. And actually, they're not even voting for the people, because most people haven't a clue who their councillor is and what they're doing. They are just voting on which colour team they're in. And, you pick a political party and hope that they'll do less damage than any of the others. So it's, again, another reason for the channel to wake people up, to get them interested, because, I hold my hand up. I've never been interested in politics. I'm still not. And you just want good councillors to get on with it. You don't want to know the details, but we do need to know the details, and we do need to have a say. And if you don't know what's going on, you're not really in a position to be moaning at them when they're passing rules and regulations that you don't agree with. So we've all got to take that responsibility. And as tedious as it is, either get to our local councils or get someone that's willing to report on what they're doing and get the public interested. Because at the end of the day, it is down to us, and it is down to numbers. And if you know anyone that's going to run, get them to run. But I was speaking to one of the councillors, and I said, why don't you run as an independent? Because, everybody hates your team at the moment. And she said, well, can't afford to, because the leaflets, they spend about £5,000 on leaflets. They have a team of people for 6 weeks knocking on doors and canvassing and delivering. She said, I can't do that as an independent, and I've got the backing and support. So you can see why the political parties are so successful, and why you don't have many independents, because most people can't afford to do it. So when the channel gets bigger, what I would like to do is have a fundraiser and see if we can get some more people to run as an independent. And if enough, if everybody in Colchester put £1 in, we'd have £200,000 that we could help genuinely independent people get elected. So it is a problem. Certainly I know people in other areas that are doing it. I know quite a few people up and down the country, but not enough locally. And also you need to have a lot of people, because one councillor on their own won't make a difference. And that is the problem. You need an independent party within that council. Or something we're trying to push for a little bit is having councillors that are contacting their constituents and let them knowing, I've got to vote on this thing next week. here's what I think we should do. Here are our options. What do you want me to vote? How do you want me to do it? So that the councillors are actually going in representing their constituents rather than them just saying, oh, they voted for me, so whatever I think is how it will be perfect. And getting more communication. But that's as much down to the general public as it is the councillors. So we're trying to sort of suggest that and get that, bridge that gap, because most people don't care what's going on. But we all know, those of us that have read and researched, that everyone's going to care really quite soon. So now is the time. It's your last chance to get in and get going.
Do you think in your area there's any awareness at all of the C40s cities thing, where we get no meat and no dairy by 2030 and we don't fly? We're limited to 3 pieces of clothing, that type of thing. Are people aware of that? And if they are they in favor of it, or do they hate the idea?
Certainly within the circles I move in, everybody knows. But on the streets in general, I've no idea. I suspect not. And I suspect people wouldn't. It wouldn't be popular. There's always 1 or 2 people in the comments that, oh, well, you know, we've got to do it. We've got to save the planet. But anybody that's read and researched or, you know, watched any of the documentaries realizes this is a load of rubbish. So that does need to get out there. Or when you try and discuss it with people, they say, oh, that'll never happen. And it's like, well, it doesn't all have to happen. And you're right, it probably won't every last bit happen. But even if a small percentage of that happens, think how it'll impact your life. But unfortunately, I think most people are so busy, they're trying to earn a living, they've got a family to support, they've got a family to deal with. No one's got the time or energy to really get in and deal with this stuff. It's just like one thing too many. And that is a very big problem, that apathy. And I don't know how we can reach people, because especially if they don't believe that the C40 cities and all that lovely stuff that's coming our way with Agenda 2030, they don't believe it. And it's sort of, we can be a frog in boiling water very quickly, don't you know, if the bubbles forming around you. We need to put a stop to this, but we shall see. It's down to us at the end of the day. We just need enough of us.
Is there any movement in your area either way about 15-minute cities to put up the cameras and to restrict your movement and charge you if you leave your neighborhood and all that other stuff? Is that anything happening there?
We got cameras galore, but that's for safety, apparently. Well, they've denied it. We've gone in, we've asked them, and they absolutely categorically deny it. Yet at the same time, we consider putting in all the infrastructure. So if the councillors themselves don't realise what they're doing, I did do a video on 15-minute city nonsense directed at the councillors, like, okay, here's all the pieces that you're probably not seeing. And when that all comes together, here's what's going to happen. But yeah, I don't think enough of them have seen that video. Well, that's the thing. Because it sounds so dystopian and so unlikely, people just don't believe it's ever going to be like that. But they're not looking ahead. And it's like, well, when they've got a digital currency and you've got a digital ID and everything's electric, it's going to be very easy. You're not going to be able to go anywhere, do anything or buy anything unless you have permission to do so. But people cannot see that yet. And I just hope they do before it's too late.
So are there any people that you could recommend, any people's work that you particularly like and trying to come up to speed on any of this stuff on climate or energy?
Well, certainly your work, Tom, you know, looking through any of your podcasts, I've really enjoyed the one you did the other day with Kurt. Yeah, I mean, I said, Ralph Ellis, I love he's done a wonderful presentation. You can see it on a UK column. They filmed the whole of that Glastonbury net zero debate. I love Tony Heller and obviously William Happer and all of those. And yeah, I haven't had a chance to talk about urban heat islands yet. And I've been wanting to get that. It's gone in so many speeches and it's been too long and I've had to cut it from each speech, but I'd love to talk to them about that at some point. Yeah, who else? I love the CO2coalition.org website. That's so useful for all the charts. And that's another thing. You don't have to be a climate scientist. You can look at those charts and see where CO2 has been throughout history, and that really we're at a low now, not a high. So they tend to be my main go-to sources.
All right. And you mentioned before it would help if you got some donations for funding, right? You could do a lot if you had some people donate. We can go to your YouTube site, can we, to donate?
Yeah, I mean, under the videos, we put donation links because it has been a full-time job. And I've had to put my business on hold for 18 months to do this, but it's got to the point I knew by May I would have to start to go back to work again, and that has happened. But yeah, if the channel grows enough and enough people put in, £1 a month each, then I don't need to be so concerned about how my business is doing because, helping people, I teach garden design online, but it's been very difficult to concentrate on that when you see what's coming down the pipe. It's felt so much more important to be warning people about what's coming and how not green these green technologies are. I mean, that just makes my blood boil when you look at the damage it's doing to the earth and people are convinced that they're doing good. So that has just really got me wound up. So that's why I took the time out of my business. But you can only do that for so long. And I've reached the end of that road now. So the videos, there'll be less of them. I'll still do them from time to time. But yeah, if people want to help and donate, that would be absolutely wonderful.
Do you have a sense yet as to whether there's going to be any blowback for your business because people don't like your climate and energy realism? Or can you tell?
Well, who knows? I mean, I keep them both separate because to begin with, I had a couple of videos on my Successful Garden Design channel. And then when they started taking off and I realized I'm going to keep needing to do these videos on a weekly basis, that's when I did the separate channel. But I don't tend to, I say a little bit on my work email, but I tend to keep them quite separate. But, if people have a problem with it, they do. And I don't care because this is so important. It's not a good enough reason not to speak out.
Excellent. So in the show description, I have a link to your Council Watch YouTube and your Twitter feed, your X feed. Any other places we can find your work?
I think other people have shared it, but I only do YouTube and Twitter. That's my limit. I mean, we do stuff on Telegram, but they're not public groups on Telegram. So I try and keep my time focused on what we're doing because you can get so carried away with all of the social media and all of the comments. I just don't have the time, especially with the emails as well. So yeah, I limit myself to those.
All right. Any other points you'd like to make before we finish this one up?
I would like to encourage people to get to their council and, just so they know they're being watched and that people are taking interest in what they're doing. The good councillors actually enjoy it. They like the fact you're showing an interest because they're so used to a disinterested public and then they moan at them after the event. So to have people actually come in and participate, good councillors will encourage that. So just getting that dialogue going and just giving them a bit of additional information, even if it's just by email, because not everybody wants to do public speaking, although it's not really public speaking because you're reading it. I certainly couldn't go in and do those speeches off the cuff. I need to have it written down. So just do whatever you can do. And a lot of people seem to think that all the councils are controlled. And yeah, maybe behind the scenes they are. But if you can get to the individual councillors one at a time, it will start to make a difference because when this house of cards starts to crumble, and it's already crumbling, it'll just go quicker the more people that speak out. I mean, for me personally, I can't have known all of this stuff, researched it, and then just kept quiet. For me, that's a no-go. We've got to voice and speak now while we can, because there might come a day when social credits and all that type of stuff, and you just cannot speak out about the government. And if people don't think that that would ever come true, just look at China. So now is the time to take action. Now's not the time to be shy, even if you are.
Fantastic stuff. Yeah, I'm a huge fan, again, of your work and your courage. I'm so happy that you agreed to be on this podcast. I did forget that you have a clip that I'm going to put on here at the end of the podcast.
Good evening. I've been a supporter of green energy and a keen environmentalist since my 20s. My office is solar powered, so I was mortified to discover that a single lithium mine causes millions of tons of waste every year laced with sulfuric acid and radioactive uranium, polluting the water supply for 300 years, not to mention the unacceptable human costs with child labour to mine cobalt. Wind turbines, which last about 20 years, consume a colossal amount of resources and energy to manufacture and install. and then gallons of oil to lubricate, and they can't readily be recycled. Solar panels are also extremely difficult to recycle, costing more than the production of the panel, and lithium batteries pose steep challenges too. Add to that the human suffering, which we've all unwittingly been part of just by owning a laptop or mobile phone, which is minimal compared to what's required for an EV or solar farm. These so-called green or ethical solutions aren't solutions at all, just very good marketing from the $1.5 trillion a year climate change industry. That's $4 billion a day, by the way. None of us can undo what's already been done, but what we can all do is make sure this doesn't escalate exponentially with fleets of unnecessary EVs and acres of solar farms eating up our precious farmland.
Have the panel considered the dangers of electric vehicles in their planning, and has a fire service approved safety plan been created for dealing with the fires? A Freedom of Information request shows that in London in the last 5 years, there have been over 500 fires caused by the batteries in electric vehicles. Over 200 of the fires were cars, over 100 electric bikes, over 60 scooters, 19 buses, and 10 HGV fires.
Why is Council content to declare a climate emergency in the absence of robust evidence or any defining parameters? What evidence do you have that you're saving the planet? How can you justify contamination of water supply for 300 years in your efforts to reduce CO2? Is the risk of toxic hazard to our community, the toxic manufacturing processes, and the recycling challenges, as well as the death of children, unimportant enough for Council to feel able to ignore?
It's just a sample of the one that went viral the most. And then also Cheryl talking about the fires and Karina, because it's unfortunate that people's attention span is only like 3 minutes. So Cheryl's speech on the fire, I didn't put that much in, just a taster for people. But she actually knows somebody that is very high up in the fire department. So she was able to get a whole load of information from him on just how difficult these EVs are to put out. So it's a bit unfortunate that people have watched my bit, but they haven't seen the others. So I encourage them to watch those other videos, because Cheryl and Karina have done some absolutely cracking speeches that should have gone viral that haven't.
All right. Yeah, that short and sweet content is fantastic. So I'll let you go, but Rachel Mathews, thank you very much. Hope to talk to you later.
Thanks, Tom. It's my pleasure.
Goodbye.